So Quits had a question. He wanted to know what the reasoning behind soul memory was, and then he asked, after somebody responded, he said yes, but don't they accept feedback? And I'm going to tell you guys a nice little story about FromSoft and feedback.
Story.
So when Dark Souls 2
before
came
you
out,
go into the big story, can I tell you something?
yeah.
I have heard of Soul before, because I think he's done a few OSTs for games. I like how in the trailer, remember when I asked if he was a chiptune artist?
Mm-hmm.
It literally says in the trailer, from chiptune artist.
Oh well,
what?
I don't look at the trailer. If you scroll down to the page, there's the little like you can press play for the whole playlist thing.
No, I know. I just thought it was funny because I was like, "Hey, Frosty, is it a chiptune artist?" You're like, I don't fucking know. And then it's like trailer from chiptune.
Well, I never
artist.
watched
like,
the fucking trailer. God damn it!
Watch the trailer, dude.
What's the trailer,
Well,
dude?
chiptune is just normally defined by usage of heavily bit crushed sounds, and in some cases, the original sound processors for certain consoles. Fun fact. Anyway, please continue. I'll shut up now.
This is Frosty. This is going to be the story about that little collaborative feedback thing you guys put together.
Oh
right?
yeah!
Oh yeah! Oh yeah!
Oh yeah!
All right, everybody in chat, settle down and get your popcorn because
Oh well,
this
don't
is
hype it up because
great-
now it's gonna be a shitty story because it's gonna be overhyped.
Hype,
God damn it!
Hype,
No,
hype,
no.
hype. Everybody, press H for hype. H for hype. H for hype. On both screens. Go,
the
go, go.
story isn't about soul memory. It's about FromSoft and their acceptance of feedback. So when Dark Souls 2 came out, the group of us on Soul Brand and a couple of others kind of put together a collaborative effort to write up a big article, more or less, about what we kind of thought about the Souls games and what we thought about Dark Souls 2 and what, potentially the community response was and what, might be reasonable to change, right? Or just to give them an idea of what our impressions are, right? So we had this huge thing we wrote up. There was like pages upon pages, and we sent it across.
You made a video too, didn't you?
Well, I made a video of some bug fixes, and that actually got fixed, but that's kind of beside the point. But we wrote up this big article on how stat scaling was kind of out of balance, how damage calculations were kind of weird, how elemental damage was kind of strong, infused weapons with buffs and stuff were kind of a little bit too strong. There wasn't enough incentive to do like strength type stuff, blah blah blah, right? Whatever. Now, when we sent that through, it took a little while for anything to actually happen, any patches to come in. And when the patch finally came and they looked at our response and they looked at what we said and they actually made some adjustments, the only thing that they changed was... Oh, I'm dead. Was that in our article, there was like one little line where we said how the barrel armor was in the game files for Dark Souls 2. Like, people had data mined it, they saw the little icon, but they couldn't get it to load or anything like that. There was no mesh for it or something of that nature. So we made mention of the barrel armor, and it was buried in this like 3 or 4 page long thing, just like suggestions, problems, and they removed it. They removed the barrel armor from the game files in the next patch, and nothing else was adjusted that we had wrote. So they read it, and they knew that the fucking barrel was still in the goddamn files and people found about it. But that was the only thing that they decided to change. So,
and this is how FromSoft is, how receptive FromSoft is to feedback.
So yeah, when people talk about, oh well, just get the community's opinion on, they'll just tell FromSoft and they'll change. It's no, they won't. They won't. it's not how they work as a company. It's just, so I don't know.
Yeah. So there you go, everybody. That's the priorities of those who were in charge of making these adjustments.
Was the hype worth it?
Now, see, but the thing is, I don't know. So I want to preface, well, not preface, but I want to like clarify that I don't know what happened on their end. Like, I know that it was sent across to them, and I know somebody at least saw it, and something was changed. But I don't know if like they read the whole thing and they're like, oh yeah, all this is stupid, but this is the only part we need to change. Maybe it was somebody who just didn't really give a shit and just like, yeah, whatever, I'm gonna pass it along. I don't really give a fuck, it's whatever, right? I don't know what happened in that situation. I don't know if they like legitimately ignored it. But either way, the communication is not there. It's just not available. And whether or not the communication is not there and they're willing, or the communication is not there and that's how they want it, is, you know, something I'm not aware of. But that's the situation we're in, and they're not receptive to feedback. It's not going to happen.
Well, I can shed some light on this actually, Frosty, because
can you? Are you allowed
not,
to say anything about this? Like,
well, yeah, because this is public knowledge, but it's
okay.
not common public knowledge in the West. Because this gets back to the article I linked from the interview with Inafune earlier, the E3 interview with him. FromSoft actually is relatively involved with their Japanese fans only. They do some Nico Nico Doga streams, and they do other occasionally events where they do talk directly with their Japanese fans. Nothing for the West. And that
Patch the
again,
clinic, Skip.
that again has to do with their that insular attitude among Japanese developers, where they're afraid of Western markets and Western audiences because they don't understand them. They're afraid to engage with Western audiences because of the language barrier and because they don't understand Western culture or Western proclivities. So you just get this mess of xenophobia where they hide in their little Japan bubble and they don't engage with the West. And really don't make any effort because they would rather wait for somebody else to do it, because they don't want to be the first, because in Japan it's frowned upon and looked unfavorably upon to stand out or to do anything different. And again, if people are interested, I will link the article with Inafune, his interview, that really he does an excellent job of explaining that about the Japanese game industry in general. So, yes, FromSoft does listen to their Japanese fans, but they have no presence in the West. And this is another problem, not just with them, but with Japanese developers in general. FromSoft is a very small company. They have about 250 employees, and that might sound like a lot, but it's tiny. Squaresoft, or Square Enix, Capcom, Nintendo, Konami, Microsoft, Sony, these are companies with hundreds and hundreds of employees. FromSoft is very small. FromSoft relies, they self-publish in Japan. I should start with that. FromSoft publishes all their own games in Japan because that's where their presence is. And Japan is a very small country. It's just some small islands, very dense with population, but geographically very tiny. FromSoft relies entirely on its publishers. That is Sony for Demon's Souls and Bloodborne, and Bandai Namco for Dark Souls 1, 2, and eventually 3. They rely solely on their publishers. Huh? Oh. The FromSoft relies solely on their publishers to handle all of their correspondence with their Western audiences. I probably don't need to tell people that that's very, very inefficient, because if anybody in the West wants to talk to FromSoft, they have to go through either Bandai Namco or the Western branch of Sony, SCEA. And the chain of communication, first of all, going through that middleman is terrible. But then you have the language barrier, you have to, the report that Frosty and the others sent had to be translated into Japanese and then sent to FromSoft. Mm-hmm. And it more than likely was sent by email and ended up in the inbox of somebody who might or might not have been the correct person to send it to, who might or might not have even read it, much less actually forwarded it to the development team. So you get this incredibly convoluted series of links in a chain that this correspondence has to go through that simply doesn't exist in Japan. In Japan, it's just point A to point B. So there are so many obstacles to people in the West communicating with a company like FromSoft. It's just unbelievable. Just unbelievable. I'm sorry, I'm done.
Well, the nice thing is that, you know, for all the shit that Bamco does get, they're doing a pretty okay job about trying to get involved. I think they're one of the better publishers in that regard. And I don't know if you guys are too aware, but Jay, who's the community manager, is fucking awesome. So we're fairly lucky in that regard. So I'm fairly hopeful for Dark Souls 3 and some other things. But I don't know, man. I'm excited about that game, and I'm disappointed that FromSoft is so not open to doing things. And oh my god, I'm so fucked.
Well, this gets back into
Weapon broken. Yes. Oh, that's exactly what I wanted.
This gets back to what we were discussing about E3, Frosty, where it's not even necessarily entirely Namco's fault, because they have to go through that same chain of communication where somebody at Namco who wants to communicate with FromSoft has to translate their correspondence into Japanese. They have to then send it to FromSoft, where internally it might or might not get where it needs to go, and whoever does get it might or might not even pay attention to it, might just skim through it and say, oh, who cares, and delete the email. The other issue is that even somebody in Jay's position as community manager, he has to go through so many different steps in order to get what we give him just to the top of the chain at Namco, much less to FromSoft. I can only imagine what it even looks like when it reaches FromSoft, if it reaches them.
I can't feel pity on that though. Like, they need to get their shit together with that. Like, it's
I don't
if
disagree.
it's that critical, which
Don't
it is.
disagree.
I mean, they need. It's not like, you know, most other companies wouldn't be able to get away with that. Like, that's
Well,
unacceptable. You know what I mean? Like, they
here's
wouldn't be able to be like, oh, well, there's just a language barrier and, you know, all this other shit. It's like, no, that doesn't work in 2015. Not with the internet. Sorry.
I mean, we've
that
had
kind of stuff.
this discussion a few times. Like, we actually had this discussion at V3, and my just to play devil's advocate, what do you think FromSoft would look like if they did respond and you know, take all this advice and information from the Western
they're
audience?
not supposed to take. They're not supposed to.
No,
take
no, no.
all
I'm just saying.
advice.
I'm just saying. Like,
wasn't it.
no. I
And I
understand.
wasn't
I understand.
at
But
E3, so
what
I didn't take part in the conversation,
what I'm saying is, you know, is the fact that they're so insular, you know, that they're so cut off from outside influence, is that why their games are how they are? Like,
Initially, yes. I genuinely
you know,
think initially, yes. But now that it's had such widespread appeal in the Western market, there are a lot of people in the Western market who understand what these games are intended to be. And there are a lot of people who care a lot about them. There are probably...
But if you don't know Western
just by sheer
market, like, how do you filter that? How do you filter the bullshit from the useful stuff? You know what I mean?
hire people who understand that market. And I'm not
That's-
talking about
that's true.
jackass, like, fucking, you know, Ubisoft. And no, there are plenty of people who would easily be fantastic at advising, like, game design and things like that. Honestly, like, Marcus is somebody who would actually strike me. Like, he would do phenomenal in that role. He's bilingual,
Well,
and, you know...
Here's the thing, though, Nick, and this is from my conversations with Marcus, and Codester Bro brings this up in chat as well, so now is probably a good time to address it. Yes, absolutely. What FromSoft needs more than anything else is a Western community manager for them. Somebody who does
Yeah,
basically
absolutely.
what Mr. Karche does. The problem is, Marcus is not in a position to do that, and given
And I'm not
his-
saying Marcus needs to do that. I'm
Well,
saying
but,
someone
but think of the
like-
person that
like
needs...
someone who has that skill set needs to be doing that.
But think of the
Yes,
skill
the
set that
thing
would
is,
be
though-
required. You would need someone who's first off bilingual with English and Japanese pretty fucking well, and you need somebody who really understands the Souls community. That's a pretty small subset of people. Like, I don't.
Well, and not
right,
only-
but even
not only
even
someone
still,
who- not only someone who understands the community, but someone who understands the games.
Yeah.
And that narrows your pool of potential candidates, much less people who are actually willing to do it. And it's a job that I don't think even people who are qualified to necessarily would want to do, just because being a community manager can be very thankless. You have to deal with trying to convince everybody at your company who actually has the power to make decisions that they need to listen to you, which in itself is a miserable battle, and I think everybody here who's held a job in a low-ranking position probably can relate to that. But on top of that,
Okay,
you hang on, Nick. We will get to it, but a large part of the problem, and I'm not making excuses for Namco because I agree with you. Yes, they should get their shit together, but a large part of this is because FromSoft does not see or understand the need to engage with their Western audiences. So even if Namco Bandai, under the best of circumstances, had their shit completely together and had a totally cohesive system of communication and everything on their end were perfectly efficient, FromSoft would still be the obstacle. You see?
Then that's them. That's on them, dude. And if that's the way they're going to play their business, then they deserve to tank. Like, that's it. That's all there is to it. Like, we can't say that, like, I love their games and everything, but if they're going to do stupid things like that, and you don't have to have somebody who's, like, super duper, you know, soul savvy. You don't. You need someone to say, this is what your Western audience is saying. How do you feel about it?
But
Right?
if someone's
Right.
not
Someone
soul
on the
savvy, how
inside.
do you filter the bullshit from what is useful?
You don't let them do it. Like, let them fucking filter the bullshit. If they see something that's bullshit, and you let them do it. Guys, this happens on an international level every day. Like, this happens all the time. And if they're not willing to do it, they're not willing to do it. And we can't say they don't have the money to do it. Like, look at how successful the last few games
Oh
have
no,
been.
it's
Well,
not a
it's
question.
not a matter
Bloodborne-
of money
Bloodborne is-
because the company that bought them out, I can't.
Kadokawa.
Kadokawa is just an infinite source of money for them. Like that's not an issue at all. Like
What it really comes down to is, and this is, again, the interview with Inafune, which I am going to dig up the link and put it in the chat again. One of the main points that he makes there is that because Japanese developers are so afraid and so xenophobic, and they just refuse to engage with the West, this is really at the crux of the issue. And a large part of what we were trying to do at E3 was to help support Mr. Karche and those who are on the more progressive cutting edge of this movement to try to get these Japanese developers to understand the need to engage. And that's really the problem, is like, up until now, up until very, very recently, trying to convince them of anything was like bashing your head in a wall. You were not going to get anywhere. And by doing things like attending E3, by showing a community presence, by having that representation of the gamers and the really the consumers there, saying, no, look, we went to the trouble to be here. We want you guys to actually hear our feedback and start paying attention to your goddamn Western audiences, because we represent an enormous portion of the people paying for your games. And if you just ignore us, well, you're going to lose our support eventually. But getting this through their heads, Nick, is the problem. And yeah, I don't disagree with you. If they're going to dig their heels in and say, oh, we don't want to engage with audiences outside of Japan, well, they made that choice. And if they tank, they tank. But
Yeah,
I'm
that's
just
on
saying,
them, dude. Like, I can't, and I'm not
But-
disagreeing with you. But I think also the idea of Japan's like xenophobia is also a bit of a trope in its own. Japan, it's almost a trope. It's almost a trope in it.
but it's in Japan. Sorry.
It's almost a trope in
Sorry.
itself if you really think about it. Like, they take so much inspiration and draw from the West now that it's almost unfair to say, well, you know, they don't pay attention to the West at all. Well, they do a lot,
well, no,
actually.
but they don't pay attention to the part of the West that is trying to give them feedback. They look at the West and they'll see what's there for them to look at without having to engage. That's the thing. They can draw influences from the West without engaging. All they have to do is look stuff up online. It's an entirely different matter from a PR standpoint to actually engage in a dialogue, a two-way street discussion with fans across the world from a culture you aren't familiar with and one that you don't understand, and exchange ideas. You see what I mean? It's kind of a different thing. They can plagiarize shit all they want without having to actually engage or talk to anybody. You know?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I still just feel like they have the means to, especially with how prevalent gaming is now. Gaming is more popular than it's ever been now, and there's no way they couldn't find somebody. And just because somebody doesn't make YouTube videos and shit like that doesn't mean that they're not out there. There are tons of people who are fantastic at this game and love every in and out of it, and there may be some bilingual people who could do jobs like that. Just because they don't have a YouTube or Twitch channel doesn't mean they don't exist, right?
Oh yeah,
So,
no,
I
there
mean,
are
I
people
feel like there's a
floating around
market out there. And if they say, hey, you know, we need a PR manager for, you know, basically community feedback, Western driven, blah, 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 whatever, you know, here's $100K a year or some shit. Like, you know, it's just, I don't know, dude. I just feel like that's something that they Frosty, what'd you die to? I totally missed that.
I wasn't gonna make it, so I tried to quit load just to try to reset the AI.
Oh,
and it
okay.
just-
The thing is, Nick, though, yes, they have the means, but that's been the case for decades, and that's the case in just about every situation in the industry. Company makes a bad game. Well, yes, they had the means to make a good game, but they didn't apply those means effectively. And it's
Well,
the
if
same...
Dark Souls 3 ends up being shit, then I guess, I mean, it's going to be egg on everybody's face, because we'll be like, well, here we go again, dude.
Well, Dark Souls 3 in a lot of ways is going to be the true test of how willing they are to engage. This year was the first E3 where the community, and I'm talking the Souls community specifically, had a substantial presence and direct representation. And I would be curious to see how much difference it makes. I'm not naive enough to get my hopes up that it's going to solve all the problems, because obviously it won't. But if even a little bit of the feedback that we provided them gets implemented, and more importantly, if they then show a willingness to continue engaging with us and continue having that discussion, then that shows a little bit of hope. That's really what it's going to come down to. Yeah, of course they have the means, but the trick for us is going to be getting them to listen to what we have to say about, well, you guys could make much better use of these means and be a lot more successful if you would just incorporate X, Y, Z. And like hiring a community manager, that's another one of those problems of utilizing what's available to them. Because think about it. If somebody at FromSoft, if President Miyazaki sits down and writes a job description for FromSoft Western Community Manager, that job description is going to have to say, in order for that person to be able to do that job effectively, it's going to have to say, must be bilingual in English and Japanese on a conversational level, at least, must have extensive experience with this particular franchise, playing the games, and try explaining that on a job description, for one thing. But it's going to look so far from what the established convention is in Japan for a legitimate job that either nobody is going to take it, or they're going to get tons of applicants who are not properly qualified from the standpoint of their familiarity with the Souls games. So,
I mean, I guess, dude, that's, and if that's the case, and if your opinion, like if your theory on it's right, then that's on them, dude. I mean, I won't be defending them basically if the West continues to provide feedback and things like that. And I'm not saying take every single thing. I mean, there may be one or two things out of a million that are just absolutely great. You know what I mean? That are like, yeah. But I think most of the things that are okay. And this is what I was going to tell you earlier, Frosty, was that you're talking about filtering the bullshit, right? Well, the thing is, there is a lot of garbage out there, but most of the things that should be changed are normally pretty big opinions, right? Like it's easy to say something so simple as network connectivity.
No, because this soul argument,
What do you mean?
The soul memory argument is just a great example of the stupidity behind that. People bitch and bitch and bitch and bitch and bitch about soul memory, but that's not the soul memory is not the issue. It really isn't. And if you're going to look at what the overall community response to that is, then they're going to change things for the wrong reasons. That's just how it's going to be. Soul memory is a problem, but not soul memory in and of itself. Soul memory is a problem because it exacerbates a lot of other issues of Dark Souls 2. Things like the fact that there's a huge level disparity there's a huge power disparity between characters at different levels. There's a lack of diminishing returns on things. And that is what creates this huge fucking issue between characters that match based on soul level. Because if you're soul level 150, normally that'd be a pretty solid spot for an awesome build, right? In Dark Souls 1. But then you can match it with people who are soul level 300, and there's a huge fucking difference in how strong your character is, and that is why soul memory is so fucking problematic. Soul memory is actually a lot better for matching with a larger group of people. It's better for promoting more multiplayer
I think I wasn't very
connections.
clear in what I was saying. I'm not saying debated topics like soul memory.
I'm just saying I'm using that
as
a very specific example because that is something that the community at large is extremely adamant about saying is wrong and is bad, but it's an incredibly misunderstood issue as far as I'm concerned.
But they've already taken that feedback. That hasn't been in a game since, and it's not going to make.
No, I understand, but I mean, what I'm saying is soul memory could have actually worked really well as a system if they had done changes to other things. Right. So I'm saying is removing soul memory necessarily the best option? I don't necessarily think it is. I mean, we've never seen how soul memory actually works in a system that's ideal for it.
Well, Frosty, you're talking specifically about them accepting community feedback here, right?
Well, yeah, but okay, fair enough. Fair enough.
Well, that's what I mean, because I think we're kind of getting into specifics that sort of get out of the purview of the larger issue. I get what you're saying, and I don't necessarily disagree. It's just that that's kind of my point, is that if they had listened to a couple of people from the community who knew what they were talking about, who understood what you just described, and said, you guys didn't necessarily need to remove this, but here is some pointers on how it should have been implemented, then that would have made the experience a lot better for everybody. And that's kind of what I think Nick is saying and what I was getting at.
It completely destroyed low-level builds, though. And that's a huge market for people. As scummy as they can be and shit, it's just destroyed. Soul memory was a problem. I mean, it was. Like, in and of itself, I still think it was a problem. Because it did. It creamed low-level builds, dude. Like, there was no innovation for those things to where people were like, oh, I'm going to just be soul level 20 and I'm going to min-max the shit out of my character because that's what I want. That's how I want to play. You literally cannot do that. That is impossible. So, I mean, unless you want to get, like, really in detail and say, okay, I'm going to try to get to soul level 20 with the most, like, low soul memory I possibly can while still min-maxing, I think it's still a problematic thing. And I get what you mean. I understand. Well, there is a huge disparity between, like, all the power. You're right. You're dead on.
I should probably
it's
clarify.
Fucking ridiculous.
I don't mean to interrupt, but I should probably clarify that, you know, if you want my opinion on it, yeah, I still think soul level is a preferable system. But I'm just saying that there's this huge disconnect between what people think are the issues and what it's most likely the case actually are the issues. Because people just claim like, oh, soul memory, it's fucking shit. Oh, it's so bad. Like, and they don't really understand why, right? Or what the actual problems there are. And that was more or less what my point was. But I just use that as an example. Like, if you're listening to the community or what seems to be a strong opinion or potentially a good opinion, it's really fucking hard to distinguish between good feedback and bad feedback unless you really have a good understanding of the game. You just can't do it.
This is precisely why it's so hard to find somebody suited for the community manager position. Because, yeah, they have to have a very deep and intimate understanding of all of these issues. And you know, where are you going to find somebody like that, first of all? Because there are so few. There are people who have that knowledge in the community, but who are not bilingual in Japanese and English, or who otherwise, you know, don't have that qualification, or vice versa. So, I mean, it just gets into the issue of, you know,
I generally think when it comes to like that, it's more of general foundational knowledge, rather so much than like absolute intimates, because they're not ultimately making the decisions. They're the people who are like, that does seem like it could be a problem. Like, it's just a foundational thing. Like, you just need to filter 90% of the bullshit. Like, you don't have to filter all of it. You just have to be able to say, why would somebody even say that, right? Like, and there are bigger issues that I think most people agree on, like network connectivity. But for the most part, those have been resolved, with the exception of Bloodborne, because they tried to revamp the whole system, right? They get rid of the soul sign system. Whereas, like, connections, for the most part, were fine in Dark Souls 2. And I'm not saying, like, I'm not talking about PvP, I'm talking about connections. Like, I found, God, why am I trying to go through bone wheels while talking about this? Anyway, you know, it's like, just foundational shit like that like, they still somehow miss that other Western games just get. And I guess it's just that, I don't know. It's just a weird topic.
That's what I mean, though, about them refusing to engage with their Western audiences, because if they did, they would know about that stuff. And the probably best example of that is Final Fantasy XIV, believe it or not, because the team originally in charge of Final Fantasy XIV, they were classic Japanese developers, no experience with the West, no idea about Western communities, no desire to involve themselves with them. And Final Fantasy XIV at launch was a steaming, burning pile of trash. I don't think anyone will disagree with me on that. Yoshi P, I believe Yoshimura is his name, but everybody calls him Yoshi P affectionately.
I'll be right back, guys.
Sure.
Sorry, I just gotta pop up.
No problem. I'll continue for the benefit of chat. Yoshi P was put in charge of Final Fantasy XIV when he approached the board of directors of Square Enix and said, guys, you're idiots. You're going about this completely the wrong way. We need to start following the Western model of MMORPGs because it's a lot more approachable, a lot more playable, and it's just going to result in a better game. So they said, you know what? You're so smart. Fine, Yoshi P. You handle this. You're in charge of Final Fantasy XIV, and you're responsible for its success or failure. So they handed him over the project. He's the director of it now. And instead of following the standard Japanese MMORPG formula, which Final Fantasy XI did, and was extremely difficult to play because you couldn't do shit in that game without a group of 5 or 6 people, he then took that model with Final Fantasy XIV and began incorporating elements of Western MMOs. And not only that, but he began directly engaging with the Western audiences who wanted to play Final Fantasy XIV. He began directly incorporating their feedback, he began listening to what they had to say, and as a result, Final Fantasy XIV is now one of the best IPs on Square Enix's list, and one of the more successful, anyway, MMOs. I don't think it still comes anywhere near to WoW, but for a Japanese MMO, its success is unprecedented. And it's because they took that step and engaged with the West. And you look at companies like FromSoft, where you even bring up the idea of engaging with the West with them, and they cower. They go, oh, no, we don't understand that. No, we can't, we don't know how to do that. No, we're just gonna hide under our little rock and just pretend the West doesn't exist and just make games in Japan. And if somebody else is willing to sell them for us in the West, great. But no, we don't know about any of that shit. So just one example.
You know, and I'm coming in on the tail of somebody finishing. I have no idea what's happened. But I had a thought. Hi, by the way, I'm back. I had a thought that I just lost, so never mind, I guess. It's cool. I mean, just don't worry about it. Just fucking. But no, I don't disagree with you guys, honestly. I'm playing devil's advocate in a lot of cases, and I just don't like...
well, that's
I guess
fine. That's how you have a good debate.
Something that gets me pretty heated is like I guess like fanboyism towards it, and I think a lot of people like jump FromSoft's defense when they need criticism. If we do not criticize them, then their games are not going to get better.
Oh, absolutely.
And you know, and I think a lot of people will just, and I'm not saying you guys are doing that. It's something I see a lot though, like just, you know, people's critiques and stuff where it's just like, no, it's perfectly fine. No. And it's like, no, dude, that's a huge problem. You know, it worked fine in game A, but it just didn't work in game B. You know, and it's just like that kind of thing where I just don't want FromSoft to get away with not doing shit that like other companies can do flawlessly, right? You know, I think they've got very intelligent people working for them. I think, you know, they all do a great job. I think Miyazaki's a great director, and, you know, he's got great ideas. And, I mean, but that doesn't mean they're without criticism. Like, if you don't criticize it, it's just not going to get any better. So I'm just basically being devil's advocate here to keep the debate going and stuff.
That's fine.
I just don't want them to get away with everything because they're an awesome company and I want them to keep getting better. And I swear to God, if they stagnate and start season passing everything and all this shit, I'm going to lose it. Because, like, I've talked about this before about how, like, this game, no joke, and it sounds dramatic, it literally saved video games for me. Like, no joke, back in 2011, I was fucking done, dude. I was like, I'm over this shit. All these games suck, you know, blah, blah, blah. I had sold, like, most of my consoles. I was like, the game market, it's done, dude. Like, this is bullshit. Every game sucks. There's no difficulty. Everything's a fucking first-person shooter. Then I played this shit, and I was like, oh my God, people can still make compelling, amazing games. Holy shit, right? And so, like, to me, it's just really important, like, that they keep getting better and they keep understanding what their game is and how, like, important it is to gaming in general. Like, the Souls series is extremely important. Like, it is one of maybe, like, 5 series that is just, like, is, like, the only, like, the last bastion of defense in terms of, like, AAA titles. Because it is a AAA title now. It's huge. Like, it's massive. The marketing campaigns are huge. Everything's big. They sell a ton, and it's just important. Like, it's an important series, and, you know, people need to understand that.
one of the unfortunate results, I think, of developers trying to market their games to wider audiences is the kind of decline in that sort of uniqueness that we've been seeing since Dark Souls 2. But a couple of people in chat have made good points as well that are relevant to what we're discussing here. Factual Vermin says, it's also weird to me that as a whole, Japanese games tend to be shittily coded and optimized. It's weird to me that even though the country is so tech and educationally advanced, this is something that Japan kind of has a reputation as being, people call it a land of contradictions, and that's a very good way of looking at it. But that's symptomatic of being a country that was forced to grow up too quickly. They had their borders forced open and Western technology basically shoved down their throats. Not only Western technology, but Western culture. And they didn't really have a chance to assimilate that in a natural way. It was very much forced and very much an unnatural process, as a result of which all of that high tech and all of the advancements that they've made as a result of having Western technology brought in and being refined there are now at odds with all of the traditions and antiquated attitudes that have not had a chance to catch up with that, such as, for example, the extremely regimented hierarchical systems that practically all of their corporations now operate on. And the systems that don't really allow for dialogue, the attitude that being different is bad and that it's better to fit in, because productive things don't tend to get done that way. And that's a whole other discussion in and of itself. But that's kind of what's going on there. There are a lot of contradictions in Japan, and people look at them and say, oh, they're an amazing land, they're a utopia, they're the coolest country on... No. If that's what you think of Japan, then you don't know anywhere near enough about the country. That's okay. What's up, Frosty?
I'm losing it. I'm fucking losing it. I'm fucking losing my mind.
Oh God, man! Do what you gotta do. Do what you gotta do.
These clams, man. These fucking.
He took
clams.
off his armor.
Oh my God, Frosty, you're still on the clams, dude.
I just want to attempt C. I just want to get there.
I'm not even kidding. I thought you finished that like 2 hours ago. Like, no joke. I thought he was out of the Duke's archives, and I thought he was like going somewhere else.
He's just been trying to get past the clams.
I am so sorry, dude. I had no idea you were still there.
And to President Miyazaki's comment in the chat that criticism, sure, but being cutthroat about anything that doesn't fit with what you like is completely different. Yes, but cutthroat about etc., that is how Dark Souls 2 ended up with the soul memory system in the first place, and it is also how Bloodborne ended up with the Bell Maidens. That is the result of being cutthroat. What we're talking about here is reasonable, measured, civilized criticism that is relevant and is directly based on real, certifiable, objective issues. That's the kind of criticism we're talking about. The last thing any of us want is to have just anybody able to go to FromSoft's community manager and whine about, oh, this game should have an easy mode. I can't handle all of these hollows beating the shit out of me when I blindly charge into a situation and get killed. No, that's the last thing we want. But we're talking about people who are intelligent and reasonable and rational and familiar enough with the games to know what the hell they're talking about. Those people engaging in a meaningful and productive way with companies like FromSoft to provide feedback that is helpful without pushing an agenda. And now I have to scroll down 8 pages.
We should change the topic.
Yeah, we should, but people in chat actually
we are all... I mean, there's been some great points, but dear God, this is a downer conversation.
It is, yes.
Everything fucking sucks. FromSoft is the worst.
We're all doing this, and I want to just clarify that I have been streaming Dark Souls for the past 8 hours of my life. Right? You know what I mean? Like, and I can't make that more clear that, like, literally these games are extremely important to me, and that's why I get so butthurt about them, because they literally are... They're like the embodiment of what a game that would have come out 20 years ago would be if... Fuck you, Patches. God, should I just kill Patches? Press 1 for me to kill Patches. I hate this shit.
Patches is already dead. Oh, God. President Miyazaki, and